Bom dia a todos, bem-vindos a mais um webinar. Quero agradecer a presença de vocês. E hoje a gente vai ter um webinar bem especial. Hoje a gente vai falar sobre o Scenic Eclipse, mas com um foco nas explorações, nas expedições que o iate leva os clientes. E além da gente explorar esses destinos, a gente também vai ter uma participação super especial, uma presença internacional, que é o Jason Fletcher, que ele é gerente de operações de expedições. Então, é uma pessoa que domina muito bem o assunto do que a gente vai tratar hoje. Quem vai tocar esse webinar hoje é o Ricardo e o Flávio. Eu espero que vocês aproveitem bastante, porque eu vou estar assistindo também, porque realmente é um produto muito, muito incrível que a gente tem para oferecer.
É isso aí, Paula querida, nossa anfitriã tradicional de webinars, todas as quartas-feiras às 10 da manhã. E hoje eu estou aqui tocando. Queridos, muito bom dia, muito obrigado pela audiência. Eu vou ter junto comigo aqui o Flávio Policarpo da Scenic Group, mas antes eu queria passar para vocês aquela mensagem inspiracional da Velle para a gente continuar sonhando. Vamos assistir junto?
Há 18 anos, milhares de viajantes degustam as nossas experiências únicas e aprovam. Conectar pessoas de diferentes culturas, cores e sabores se tornou nossa especialidade. Continuar cumprindo essa nossa missão no futuro é uma das nossas certezas. Deixar os seus dias mais leves, compartilhar a esperança de um mundo melhor e a certeza de que tudo isso vai passar. Hoje convidamos você a olhar o futuro. Venha com a gente aproveitar ao máximo esse tempo que nos foi dado. Inspire-se, planeje sua próxima viagem, sua próxima experiência memorável. E conte com a gente para tornar seu sonho uma realidade. Nossas experiências e conexões ao redor do mundo estarão lá, à tua espera. Cuide-se. Estaremos todos prontos e saudáveis para quando você puder vir. Velle Representações, experiências e conexões ao redor do mundo.
Então é isso, vamos continuar sonhando. Essa é a nossa mensagem. E eu vou chamar aqui agora o Flávio. Ô, Flávio, tudo bem, querido? Seja bem-vindo.
Tudo bem.
Mais um webinar. Hoje em minha companhia e não da Paulinha, né? Mas ela cedeu o espaço aqui por uma questão meio óbvia, porque assim a gente já teve experiência a bordo do nosso querido Scenic Eclipse, né? E hoje, efetivamente, o nosso tema, que é o Scenic e as experiências polares, né? Vamos ter uma ótima surpresa, que vai falar e dar maiores detalhes para nós sobre as experiências no polo. Mas, de qualquer maneira, a gente precisa antes fazer uma introduçãozinha com o nosso querido Scenic Eclipse, né?
Isso mesmo, Ricardo. Bom dia a todos os participantes. A gente vai dar passar rapidamente o que é o Eclipse antes de entrar nas experiências polares, né? E
eu vou começar, então, Flávio, se você me permite, falando um pouco dessa foto aí, porque eu estive presente nessa época, né, em setembro do ano passado, eu estava a bordo, né, tive a honra de ser convidado aí pela companhia, na experiência que foi o batismo do navio, que foi em Nova York, inclusive, né? Nessa foto aí nós temos aí ao centro a Ellen, que é a madrinha do Scenic Eclipse, né? E ladeada aí pelo Glenn, que é o presidente da companhia, e a esposa dele, né? Uma companhia que, aliás, é familiar até hoje, mas ela, assim, não é tão antiga, mas é tradicional, não é mesmo, Flávio?
Isso mesmo, Ricardo. Na verdade, a Scenic ela já é uma empresa que tem mais de 30 anos de mercado. Começou na Austrália como uma empresa de tours terrestres, e desde 2008 a gente vem trabalhando com cruzeiros também. Nesse período, a companhia já ganhou uma série de prêmios da mídia especializada, né? Em 2008, nós começamos com os cruzeiros fluviais, e a partir do ano passado, nós começamos a expandir o portfólio para o mar, com o lançamento aí do Scenic Eclipse, tá? E hoje a gente vai falar dos roteiros polares de eclipse, como a gente falou, porém, a gente vai dar uma pincelada no que é o eclipse. Bom, todos os produtos Scenic são considerados produtos verdadeiramente all-inclusive, ou seja, tudo está incluído de fato, tá? Cabines luxuosas, serviços de mordomo, todas as comidas, todas as refeições, e entre as comidas, entre as refeições também está tudo incluído, bebidas, todo momento, e todas as excursões também estão incluídas, tá? Excursões de terra, excursões de expedição. Apenas o helicóptero e o submarino, que a gente vai falar mais para frente, são opcionais, tá? O restante tudo está incluído.
Inclusive, só para constar, né, são opcionais, mas por que isso já não incluiria, né? Só para o nosso público saber e até ter uma base aí para comentar com os nossos novos clientes, porque nós vamos ter vários, diversos, eu tenho certeza. Tem dois critérios bem básicos, né? Essas duas experiências, primeiro, elas dependem muito do clima, né? Tanto para voar quanto para submergir, né? Também depende muito de vontade, né? Tem gente que é claustrofóbico, não quer saber de entrar em submarino, e tem gente que odeia voar de helicóptero. Então, por causa disso, a companhia preferiu não incluir, né?
Exato, exato. Fica como uma atividade opcional para quem tiver vontade de fazer, tá?
Hoje nós vamos excepcionalmente, né, Flavio, desculpa te interromper aí, mas hoje nós vamos excepcionalmente falar bem rápido do barco, falar da parte de acomodação, ou seja, as cabines, né, da parte de espaços de wellness, sala de ginástica, spa e um estúdio, e vamos falar também dos restaurantes de um modo geral. Pode começar, querido Flávio.
Exatamente, Ricardo. Bom, antes de falar das cabines, só para ressaltar que a gente tem serviço de mordomo para todas as categorias de cabines, tá? Isso é padrão na Scenic, tanto para fluviais quanto no Scenic Eclipse, tá? Começando a falar sobre as cabines, a gente tem aí na foto a Veranda Suite. Essa é a cabine mais simples do navio. É uma cabine de 32 metros quadrados, com varanda, como vocês podem ver. Todas as cabines do Eclipse, elas contam com varanda, tá? Então, não tem cabine sem varanda, tá? E todas as cabines, elas têm ali um espaço de living e o quarto, tá? Então, como eu falei, essa é a mais simples, 32 metros quadrados. A gente tem outras categorias acima, como, por exemplo, a Spa Suite, tá? Que é uma categoria aí já de 46 a 50 metros quadrados. Essa cabine, ela é diferente não só pelo tamanho, tá? Mas ela também conta com uma jacuzzi com vista para o mar, tá? E além disso, os passageiros dessa cabine contam com serviços de spa, alguns serviços de spa que já estão incluídos, tá? Acima da spa, a gente tem a Grand Panorama Suite, que já é uma cabine aí de 105 a 110 metros quadrados. É uma cabine que ela tem uma sala bastante ampla, ela tem um quarto bastante amplo, um banheiro bastante amplo, que a gente vai mostrar no próximo slide, além de um deck externo bastante amplo também. É uma cabine dupla, tá? Todas as cabines são duplas no Eclipse, exceto em alguns roteiros específicos que existe a opção sob on request, né, mediante solicitação de cabines triplas, mas não são todos os roteiros que têm essa disponibilidade, tá? Bom, aí nessa foto a gente tem a imagem do banheiro da Panorama Suite, dá para vocês terem uma ideia do espaço, né, banheira e chuveiro separados, bastante espaço, bastante ampla, toda a decoração, todo o revestimento em mármore, e isso está disponível em todas as cabines, todos os banheiros têm esse mesmo revestimento, tá? E além da Panorama Suite, uma categoria acima ainda, a gente tem a Owner's Penthouse Suite, que já é uma cabine aí de 195 metros quadrados, também dupla, tá? É uma cabine que também tem uma sala ampla, um quarto amplo, um closet e um banheiro bastante amplo, com vista para o mar também, com varanda, chuveiros separados, além de um deck externo, né, com uma vista panorâmica, com uma jacuzzi. Tá? Então, essa é a cabine mais luxuosa, é de 195 metros quadrados, e você pode conectar essa cabine com uma cabine spa também, e fazer uma grande cabine aí de 247 metros quadrados para até 4 passageiros.
Eu queria só complementar, Flávio, que assim, em todas as cabines também é oferecido o hobby, né, o roupão, é oferecido chinelo, e os amenities são da uma marca conceituadíssima, que é a marca Spa, super bem conceituada, dermatologicamente falando, inclusive, né?
Exato, Ricardo. Inclusive, essa marca Spa é a mesma que é utilizada no nosso Spa. Tá?
Legal. Vamos em frente.
Bom, além das cabines, tá, a gente vai falar um pouco da parte de wellness, de bem-estar. O Eclipse, ele conta com um estúdio de pilates e yoga, tá? Aqui a gente tem sempre uma programação de pilates, yoga e meditação, tá? Aberto para todo mundo, é só se inscrever para poder participar das aulas. A gente conta com uma academia bastante moderna, ampla, com todo tipo de equipamento de academia, tá? E ela é aberta 24 horas por dia, ela está o tempo inteiro aberta. Ok? E aqui a gente tem uma foto da sala de descanso do spa, tá? Dá para ter uma ideia de que realmente a sala é muito bonita, mas o spa, ele é além disso. Então, além dos tratamentos de spa, você conta também com 3 tipos de sauna no spa: a sauna seca, a sauna a vapor e a sauna infravermelho, que é uma sauna, para quem não conhece, é uma sauna, ela é parecida com a sauna seca, porém, você não fica respirando aquele ar quente, porque o ar, ele não é tão quente, o infravermelho, ele vai direto na pele, tá? É uma experiência também bastante interessante. E além dos tratamentos, das saunas, da sala de descanso, tem também uma piscina de relaxamento numa área externa do spa, tá? Que está aberta e disponível aí para todos os passageiros. A gente tem não só essa piscina nesse deck do spa, mas a gente tem outras piscinas também no navio, tá? Tem piscinas, a gente tem um yacht club, que tem uma piscina grande, aquecida, e a gente tem algumas jacuzzis no deck superior do navio também, para você pegar um sol, relaxar, enfim. Elas estão espalhadas no deck superior do navio, um deck mais alto. Em termos de bares e restaurantes, a gente tem aí o lounge principal do navio, que é o Scenic Lounge e Bar. Esse lounge, ele tem capacidade para acomodar todos os passageiros de uma única vez, tá? E esse bar, ele é um bar que ele tem, tá vendo aquela coluna ali de bebidas? E o Ricardo vai poder comentar um pouco sobre isso. Você tem ali todo tipo de bebida e principalmente de uísque, tá? Então, a gente tem uma variedade enorme de uísques, todos como eu falei anteriormente, tudo já está incluído. E nesse lounge também a gente tem algumas apresentações de cantores, piano bar, enfim, é uma área para você relaxar, tomar um drink. Ricardo, você quer comentar um pouco sobre esse bar?
Nossa, posso comentar sim, né? Não é só um bar, é uma área de experiência. Eu gostaria de ressaltar isso, porque, assim, em alguns momentos que a gente tem para usufruir desse espaço, né, tem experiência do tipo a tarde do champanhe com caviar, por exemplo, e junto com o capitão, né? Então, você tem todo esse tipo de experiência. Agora, o que mais me chamou a atenção mesmo é o que você falou aí da parede do bar, né? A parede do bar é impressionante, porque, assim, todas aquelas garrafas, 100% daquelas garrafas são de puro malte, ou seja, é uísque puro malte. Tem desde 18 anos até 35 anos de envelhecimento, é uma coisa de louco. Eu, obviamente, quando estive a bordo, a cada noite experimentei um, né? E os barmans são de extrema qualidade. Uma tarde que eu cheguei lá, ele me ofereceu um drink que ele era de criação dele, inclusive, era maravilhoso, e eu não recusei, evidentemente, né? Como bom hóspede. E então, assim, é um local perfeito e, assim, é muito espaçoso, como você disse, é bem espaçoso mesmo, né? Para vocês terem uma ideia, essa área que você está vendo é um terço da área do lounge, né? Tem mais 2 partes iguais a essa. É bem espaçoso mesmo.
É, isso mesmo. Esse lounge, ele é, além de muito bonito, ele é bastante aconchegante e o bar é incrível. Bom, falando um pouco agora sobre as experiências gastronômicas e restaurantes, tá? A gente tem, assim, ao todo, a gente tem 10 experiências gastronômicas a bordo do navio, tá? Eu vou pincelar aqui algumas mais importantes para vocês. Então, o navio, ele tem aberto durante todo o dia um bar e café, chama o Azur Bar e Café. Esse bar, esse café é um bar e café, né? Porque serve bebida alcoólica também, mas ele está aberto o dia inteiro e você pode degustar esses quitutes, qualquer hora do dia, bebida, diferentes tipos de café. Ele está aberto desde o café da manhã, tá? E também para almoço. Assim, ele está aberto durante o dia, além de café da manhã e almoço. Almoço aqui é uma opção mais light, mais de saladas, tá? E durante o dia a gente sempre vem aqui para tomar um café e comer alguma coisa. É um ponto de encontro do navio, tá? Além do bar e café, a gente tem os restaurantes, tá? Esse restaurante que vocês estão vendo aqui é o Lumière. Ele é um restaurante francês, tá? Ele é um dos poucos restaurantes que precisa de fazer reserva, porque você está vendo que ele é um restaurante mais intimista. Esse restaurante, ele tem um champanhe bar, uma champanheria ali, um bar de champanhe ali no balcão, onde você pode chegar um pouco antes da sua reserva e tomar um champanhe, comer um aperitivo antes da sua reserva, e depois você vai ser acomodado, tá? E aqui você tem aí um menu de degustação, tá? São 8 pratos diferentes que são servidos, e o cardápio ele muda sempre, tá? Então você pode voltar e fazer várias reservas, se você quiser, né, em várias noites diferentes, experimentar diferentes cardápios, ok? Essa experiência gastronômica é uma das minhas favoritas. Além disso, você tem o Elements, que é um restaurante ele é um restaurante mais amplo, ele é um restaurante que não precisa de reserva, ele está aberto para café da manhã, almoço e jantar, e ele é uma culinária mais italiana, de frutos do mar e de steak, de carnes, tá? É um restaurante bastante amplo e bastante aconchegante também. Na entrada desse restaurante tem um outro bar, tá? Com uma diversidade enorme de queijos. Então, você pode tomar um vinho e comer alguns queijos diferentes antes até de você entrar para o restaurante para jantar ou para almoçar, ok? Além disso, a gente tem uma outra experiência, que é o Chef's Table. O Chef's Table, ele é uma experiência bastante diferenciada. O Ricardo pode falar um pouco mais dessa experiência, porque ele participou dela. Mas, basicamente, o Chef's Table, ele é mediante convite, tá? Então, os passageiros que estão nas cabines mais de categorias mais altas, eles certamente serão convidados para o Chef's Table, tá? Além de passageiros que já viajaram com a Scenic antes, seja nos fluviais ou no próprio Eclipse, tá? Eles certamente vão ser convidados para essa experiência de Chef's Table. Ricardo, você quer falar rapidamente sobre o Chef's Table?
Super, assim, Chef's Table, especificamente no Eclipse, ele fica dentro do Elements, é uma mesa, se eu não me engano, 14 lugares, uma coisa assim, é bem limitado, né? E é todo envidraçado, então você já entra no Element, você já vê a mesa do chef's table. Se você for no horário que já está todo mundo lá comendo, você pode até dar uma olhada para ver como é que é a experiência, né? Mas eu estive lá presente e, assim, é uma experiência gastronômica, ou seja, é um menu que pouco varia, inclusive, né? Então, e aquela coisa de você ter de 5 a 8 pratos seguidos e harmonizados com vinho para você degustar as novidades do chefe, né? Porque para mim isso é tudo novidade. Você vê aí na foto aí, eu até tive a oportunidade de degustar esse prato, que é uma carne maçaricada e como é que chama? Selada pelas pedras vulcânicas que estão quentes aí. Então, é esse tipo de prato que você tem, né? Assim, não são pratos enormes, mas é uma culinária gourmetizada e harmonizada com vinhos, né?
Bom, então, além do chef's table, a gente tem também um restaurante asiático, tá? Que é o Cocos. É importante dizer que ele não é um restaurante só japonês ou só chinês, ele é asiático, ele é um restaurante que combina aí diversas culinárias asiáticas, né, de diversas regiões da Ásia. Esse restaurante ele tem na entrada um sushi bar, e no fundo ele tem o teppanyaki, tá? Que é um teppanyaki diferenciado. O Coco, só para vocês entenderem, ele está aberto para almoço e jantar. Não precisa de reserva, tá? Porém, o teppanyaki, que é uma experiência aí para no máximo 8 pessoas, esse sim precisa ser reservado com antecedência, tá? E aí você pode pedir para o seu mordomo fazer a reserva para você, enfim. Ele é um teppanyaki mais gourmetizado. Então, quem está acostumado com aquele teppanyaki realmente raiz asiático, vai ver que aqui a experiência é um pouco mais elaborada.
O chefe ele faz uma comida excepcional, só que é autoral, né?
Exato.
Ele realmente ele faz tudo que tem no tepan, tem peixe, tem carne, tem arroz com ovo, isso, mas é autoral. No Cocos, deixa eu falar um pouquinho do Cocos também, né? Na entrada do Cocos tem também o sushi bar, né? Que você pode sentar lá para tomar uma bebida e também fazer uma boquinha, né? O barman, eles logo falam assim, quer um tiragosto? Aí vem um sashimi, um sushi, um enroladinho. Eles sempre tem um sushi man lá para fazer a qualquer momento isso. E tem o almoço no Cocos também, que é bem típico, é um bento box, né? Muito bacana.
Exato. Olha, eu vou te falar desse sushi bar aí. Teve uma noite que eu fiquei só no sushi, porque realmente o sushi era incrível e o chefe, o sushi man, ele faz um especial do dia, assim, um especial dele para você, é só pedir. E eu acabei não tendo mais condições de entrar para jantar, porque eu já tinha comido tudo no sushi bar. Mas vamos lá.
Além disso, a gente tem também uma outra opção culinária que é bem mais casual, que é o Yacht Club, que é em volta da piscina, né?
O Yacht Club ele está aberto para café da manhã e almoço, tá? Ele é uma opção mais casual. Na verdade, o barco inteiro ele é casual, tá? Mas obviamente o Yacht Club, por estar em volta da piscina, ele é mais casual. E ali é um espaço bastante... É bem espaçoso, é bem iluminado, né? A piscina, para vocês saberem, a piscina é uma piscina coberta, ela tem um teto de vidro, porque esse é um navio que vai fazer expedições polares também, então a gente precisa ter essa piscina coberta e aquecida, e o Yacht Club fica ali em volta da piscina, tá? Um espaço bastante bonito e bastante aconchegante.
Beleza. Bom, pessoal, a gente chegou ao fim da apresentação do navio em si, né, do Eclipse, e agora a gente vai revelar a surpresa. Nós vamos ter aqui, nessa segunda metade do nosso webinar, vai estar com a gente o Jason Fletcher, que é o atual gerente operacional de expedições da Scenic, aliás, especificamente do Scenic Eclipse, né? E ele vai falar bastante sobre as experiências polares. Que, eles já tiveram nessa temporada, a última temporada, na Antártica, e as que vamos ter na próxima temporada do Ártico, né? Falar um pouquinho sobre ele, Flávio?
Não, na verdade, eu queria falar que nós conseguimos trazer ele para falar para a gente, tá? E eu tenho certeza que vocês vão se impressionar com o tipo de experiência que o Eclipse possibilita os nossos passageiros realizarem, tá? Aqui tem uma foto dele com a equipe de expedição, tá? Mas, assim, eu fico muito feliz de ter o Jason falando para o Brasil agora, das experiências do Eclipse.
Poxa, eu também, Flávio. Então, vamos chamar o Jason. Enquanto a gente conecta ele, eu vou passar um videozinho aqui do Eclipse para a nossa audiência ver. É bem curtinho, bem rápido, e já estamos todo mundo aí com o Jason já falando das experiências.
Scenic Eclipse, the world's first discovery yacht.
E hoje a gente tem uma surpresa aí para o nosso público, né, Flavião? Trouxemos aí um expert, né?
Exatamente, Ricardo. A gente trouxe hoje... ele está lá nos Estados Unidos agora, né? Mas a gente conseguiu trazê-lo para apresentar para a gente algo muito novo, muito diferenciado para os agentes, que são as nossas viagens polares, tá? A gente está aqui, então, com o Jason Flasher. Ele é o Expedition Operations Manager do Eclipse. E ele vai falar para a gente sobre todo tipo de experiência polar na Antártica e no Ártico que o Eclipse pode oferecer, as atividades, enfim, vale a pena conferir, ele vai explicar tudo para a gente. Jason, welcome. Thank you for coming and share your expertise with us, okay? I will be putting you as a presenter here so you can share your screen.
While you're doing that, I just want to say thank you. It's my honor and to be here with you all and presenting. I'm very excited. Yeah, so I would like today, I put together a little presentation to just really talk about the polar regions, meaning Antarctica and the Arctic, and to discuss what the experience would be like on board Scenic Eclipse and what the differences also would be between the Arctic and Antarctic. So I wanted to first show you what a typical voyage would look like. This particular slide, I put this up here, and the reason why is this is pretty much what every operator tends to sail on a typical 11-day cruise that you see here. Like I said, it's very common. You go down to the peninsula, a quick out and back, and keep in mind, one of the differences between Scenic Eclipse and many of the other operator ships is we have speed. The ship was specifically built, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but she was specifically built to get across the Drake efficiently and quickly, very stabilized, as well as being able to get to different landing areas quickly. So she's a quick ship, and so it allows us to do more. So like I said, I just wanted to show you, this is what your typical experience would look like. But now let me show you what a typical expedition on board Scenic Eclipse looks like. This actually was one of our voyages. This is our 11-day voyage that you would see. And you see how we go to so many more places, and so we cover such greater distance. And if you look at on your screen number 5 is Deception Island. And Deception Island is one of your more popular locations that guests love to see. And the reason why is, one, it's one of the largest volcanoes in Antarctica. It's still an active volcano. But a century or so ago, what happened was one of the walls on the volcano collapsed, opening up the caldera, where we can actually sail inside the volcano itself. And so people just love that experience. And when you get to shore, now inside the caldera, there was an old British whaling base there called Whalers Bay. And so there's fantastic ruins in the area that you can go, and you can't go into the buildings, but you can definitely from the outside enjoy and experience what it was like back in the day. But what's really cool about Whalers Bay is that if you put your fingers, take your gloves off, put your fingers in the sand, it's warm. It's because it's like a hot spring, because it is a living volcano. So the water inside the caldera is a bit warm, and so you can feel the temperature difference inside the caldera than outside. So I digress a little bit about Deception because I know how much people love it, but I just wanted to show you the difference. I'm just going to go back one again real quick. Your typical 11-day experience on most voyages, most other operators, versus your typical voyage on board the Scenic Eclipse. And if you notice point number 3 at the tip, we go to the Arctic Sound, or the Antarctic Sound. And the Antarctic Sound is amazing up there because that's at the tip of the Weddell Sea. And if you're familiar with the whole Shackleton story and everything and what happened on Endurance, that's down in the Weddell Sea to the right of number 3, where the Endurance got trapped in the ice. And the sailors on board spent over a year trying to be saved as they made their way out and after the ship sunk. So the Antarctic Sound is an amazing place to see whales, especially to see the orcas out there hunting, a lot of penguins, a lot of seals, a lot of birds. Whatever your wildlife viewing pleasure is, it's in the Sound. So we tend to go there pretty much on every typical voyage. So with that, moving on, I just wanted to talk about what makes Eclipse so unique compared to many other ships. And so one, as I mentioned, how she was built to cross the Drake Passage, because I know the Drake has a lot of fear in people, because you always hear the stories of the dreaded Drake Passage, or sometimes you're lucky you get what we call a Drake Lake, which is a nice, flat, smooth crossing. Well, keeping in mind that most operator ships can only do anywhere from 8 to 12 knots maybe across the Drake, so it takes about 2 days, 2.5 days for some ships. Where on our ship, we built our stabilizers, which are these large fins that extend out from the ship, 50% larger than any other ship has. And because they're 50% larger, it makes them more stable. And when I was on board the ship, she was doing roughly about 15 knots. And like I said, most other operators can only do from 8 to 12-ish. So we have that speed, but we were in some of the crossings, we had up to 5-meter swells in crossing the Drake. And for someone who doesn't fare well with that kind of rolly seas, you barely notice it on the Eclipse. I was able to still work at my computer, walk easy, you know, and you're able to dine in the dining rooms without things flying all over the place. It was incredible. And I'm not just saying that because I've been going down to Antarctica now for 11 years, 11 seasons in Antarctica. So I have countless Drake crossings, and myself and the guides, the Discovery team has never experienced such easy crossings as we do on the Drake. And part of it is because of these stabilizers that we have. And as I mentioned, with the fins themselves, they are basically adjustable so that even at 0 speed, if there's any swell in the water, the fins themselves will move and rotate to keep the ship stable. No other ship has anything like that, state of the art. The next feature too, which is very important, that separates us from other ships, other operators out there, is what is called a dynamic positioning system. We never have to drop an anchor. The only time we actually drop an anchor is to just drop the anchor because we haven't dropped it in a week or two, and to make sure it's working. So the beauty of a dynamic positioning system is it works off of GPS, global positioning, and we have thrusters, and we also have these Ozypods, navigation system, propulsion system. With all that in play, when we get to, let's say, Deception Island, and we're at station, all of a sudden the captain will push a button, which sets dynamic positioning, sets it on the spot, so no matter what the wind condition is, no matter what the swell condition is, Eclipse will just hold position no matter what. So if we need to get lee in order to put Zodiacs in the water, or the submarine, or we need to get in the wind for the helicopters to launch properly, we can position the ship, push the DPS button, and she'll just hold for however many hours we need to hold it for, no matter what. Where on a typical vessel, if you drop an anchor, you're always spinning because the wind is pushing you, wind and current is pushing you around the anchor. So the captain is always having to lift the anchor and reposition the ship, drop the anchor again, where on the Eclipse, we never have to do that, so it never affects our operations. So launching Zodiacs, launching kayaks, launching paddle boards, or the helicopter or the submarine never is affected because the ship will never move. And that's, I wanted to explain what really makes Eclipse so unique compared to other ships. So her speed, her stabilization, and the dynamic positioning system. And what makes this special too is that since we never have to drop the anchor, we're protecting the ocean floor, the wildlife on the bottom, and when we're in tropical waters, we can go to locations around reefs because we don't have to drop the anchor in order to hold position. So where many ships cannot go because of the reefs themselves or the coral reefs, we can, because we'll never damage the ocean floor, damage those reefs. And so we can get into those locations to do our operations there where other people can't, other ships cannot go to, which is really cool and exciting. Okay, moving on. Otherwise, I digress. So lastly is our environmental systems that we have for our wastewater. Basically, a lot of people ask, especially around environmental issues, is our waste treatment system on board the ship is like no other ship, where literally when it goes out to sea, you can drink it. That's how clean it is when we dispose wastewater. It's no longer brown water, gray water. It is clear water that goes out to sea. Now keep in mind, in Antarctica, when you're within the convergence zone of between South America and the Antarctic waters, then you cannot dump anything, trash, water, nothing into the Antarctic Ocean. So we have extra tanks to hold all that water until we leave the Antarctic waters to protect those waters and so on. So, but just so you know that our waste management system, our recycling system, everything is state-of-the-art as well. With all that in mind. So we're working on our way to becoming a zero footprint ship, which will be there very shortly. Okay, so voyages, Scenic Eclipse, just to wrap up in regards to the type of voyages, on this particular map of the Antarctic Peninsula where we go, and the dotted line you see is the southern line right there, and which is the Antarctic Circle. And I just wanted to show this slide because this is our palette. We can go anywhere we want to go on this slide. So because of her speed, her stability, the uniqueness of the Scenic Eclipse is if we want to go down and do a voyage just south of the Antarctic Circle, we can. Because Scenic Eclipse has a Class 6 ice-rated hull, which is one class below an icebreaker. So she has the highest ice class hull for an expedition ship than any other ship out there. The next ship that comes closest is a Class 5. So because of that, we can go into the ice. We can go to these icy waters below the Antarctic Circle and spend time down there. Or on the other side of the peninsula, we can go deep into the Weddell Sea and explore down there that ships just don't go that far south into. But we can. So we expand those voyages because we have the speed and the ice rating to go to these locations that other ships can't go to, which is so exciting for the crew and the Discovery team as well on there. And so here, just to prove this, on the maiden Antarctic voyage of Scenic Eclipse, we went into the Weddell Sea, and the captain, on her very first landing, on the very first voyage into Antarctica, we went right up into the sea ice, parked the ship, got everybody off, and if you notice, the penguin that's on its belly is an emperor penguin. So it's so rare to see emperor penguins, and so on the first maiden voyage to Antarctica, the first landing, our guests saw 4 emperor penguins, and to the right of the slide are Adelie penguins joining the emperors who are coming over to check us all out. So such a special treat for everyone, and the Discovery team guys were blown away by that first voyage in the ice and emperor penguins as well. So special because she can. The Eclipse can do this, and so I wanted to emphasize what she's capable of doing. Okay, so what does excursions look like? So your typical excursion, of course, are every day we either try to make a landing or a zodiac cruising. I'll talk about it in a second. So at least twice a day, and always keep in mind, Antarctica will always dictate what is allowed between weather conditions, ice conditions, and I'm not talking about sea ice, but I'm talking about icebergs and so on, that could limit travel. So what we always do is the day before, if we know there's a weather system somewhere, we will typically look at the weather charts and go find microclimates of good weather and change the itinerary so that we can get off the ship at least twice, sometimes 3 times a day. Like I said, whether on land or by cruising. So here is a typical landing. We have king penguins on shore. We have baby fur seals there too. And you can see the Eclipse just off the water itself. And then this particular slide here is what our typical Zodiac cruise would be, where our Discovery team guides, who also drive the Zodiacs, and keep in mind, and I'll talk about them in a little bit, all 20 of our Discovery team that's on board at one time in the polar regions are either, they hold a master's degree, they hold PhDs, they are lecturers, they're naturalists, they're wildlife veterinaries that we have, historians, geologists, glaciologists, so on. So they're all very special in their field in order to provide a full, well-rounded experience for our guests. So whether on board presenting lectures in their specialties, or on the Zodiac cruises, or on shore, they're giving not just a tour, it's about the experience. So they're well-knowledged in the wildlife. For instance, you see here of the penguins that are on shore, and these are chinstrap penguins. And this is actually Bailey Head on the outside of Deception Island, where this slide was taken that I took this photo of. So not only do we go inside the section, we're on the outside because it's the largest chinstrap colony in Antarctica at Bailey Head. And so there's over 200,000 nesting pairs of chinstraps here at Bailey Head. So they're giving that full experience for our guests. And then of course on your typical Zodiac cruising is looking at the incredible ice sculptures and formations that we'll see along the way. All right, as well as to landings, another way we land. So not only do we go up to beaches, but at times we're going to have to get to up against a rock to where then you'll step off the Zodiac onto shore that way. So there's different types of landings between beach landings, ice landings, rock landings, and so on that you would experience. And of course, we have our shore team that's there always, no matter what, to greet the Zodiacs, to greet our guests, to help them ashore. And then onshore itself, we have our guides planted. So we have our ornithologists or bird specialists at penguin colonies, our geologists that are, you know, talking about the geology, the rocks, and so on, and our naturalists that are always out there. Some of our landings are either guided landings or they're free roaming landings where you're free to go within a parameter. Some locations require guided, you know, walks versus just free roaming. Okay, and this next slide is our kayaking excursions that we have on board. Now, keep in mind, one of the questions that come up often is what's all inclusive and what's not. And so our kayak excursions, our Zodiac excursions, our shore landings, that's all inclusive. Even our paddle boards, which we're introducing this next season. Last season we did not have paddleboarding, but this next season we are introducing paddleboarding to our polar regions, which is very exciting. Can you imagine being on a paddleboard and having a penguin jump on top of your paddleboard for a free ride? This is one hitchhiker nobody would mind having at all on board. So very exciting to be introducing it, but that's part of the all-inclusiveness as well. And then of course, you know, all the dining, all the beverages, including alcoholic beverages, are all inclusive on board Eclipse. But I know Flavio and Ricardo will be talking about that as well. But the only exception to what is all-inclusive is our helicopters and submarines, where there is an additional charge for that. So just to talk briefly on our helicopter, where you would sign up on board Eclipse on the first day when you embark on the ship itself. We would have a presentation after you get settled and everything. Our helicopter pilots do a presentation about the helicopter, do a safety talk, and then you sign up right there. Basically, if it's yourself as an individual or as friends you want to go, then the helicopter builds a manifest, and then when it's time to fly, those manifests are posted. Normally the night before, our guests are informed of when their flight will be the next day, so that you can make adjustments to your schedule for the next day, so you know when you're going to fly. This next slide is what it looks like taking off of the ship, and I can guarantee you, because I've done it a few times, there is no other experience than flying off of the Eclipse and flying back onto the Eclipse. Our pilots are top notch. Our pilots have years of experience of flying into Antarctica or the Arctic. Many of our pilots are also heliski pilots in the Swiss Alps, the Italian Alps, as well as in the United States, which, spoiler alert, we are going to be introducing heliskiing in the Antarctic 2022 season. I cannot tell you how excited we are. I just hired our heliski guides. We are working on outfitting our helicopters for this. So in the Antarctic 2022 season, we'll be introducing heliski when that happens. So, and this is just a view. This is actually in the Arctic, St. Christian Fjord, where what it looks like, from the helicopter's view. So instead of throwing in an Antarctic view, I wanted to also throw into you an Arctic in Greenland view. So where the ship is actually, unfortunately, you can't see the ship because, but the helicopter is literally right above the eclipse itself. And so we're seeing the ocean view from the ship, but this is the big eagle's view from the helicopter, which makes it so special. The other added charge for excursions, the only other one is on Scenic Neptune, our submarine itself. So those are the only two where there is the added charge, the helicopter and submarine. Otherwise, everything else is all inclusive. So what you're looking in right now, I chose this slide because not only are you seeing what the submarine looks like, so the sub itself holds 7 people. One is the pilot in the center, and then 3 people on each side on the bubbles, and your seats do rotate. But this is the submarine bay, so you're actually looking inside the ship itself, and so this is where the sub itself lives when she's not out at sea. And so what happens is the submarine will be dropped off at the dive site, and typically the ship will then move on to our excursion site, because sometimes the dive site is not near the ships. It can be up to 1 mile to 3 miles away. And so we have a Zodiac shuttle that will go back and forth to the dive site. And the reason why is we choose the best, what you're going to view location. Plus, we also have to make sure in the Antarctic waters is it's clear of ice, because the submarine, we don't want to come up under ice or anything like that. So some of the typical things that you would see from the sub itself is at the ocean floor. Normally we'll go down and she can go up to 300 meters. And so you'll see some sea spiders, sea stars, to sometimes you'll see some ice fish and so on down there, to the occasional beautiful squids and octopus that you'll see down there in Antarctica. This was a rare treat, seeing this octopus down there. Just blew everybody's mind. We'll leave it at that. So this next slide is, I just wanted to show, I know it looks congested. This was the helicopter coming in for a landing, the submarine coming in after its excursions, the kayakers coming back from their excursions, the marina deck opened up. So this past year, during Eclipse's maiden season, the Discovery team and crew have really focused on meticulously developing our procedures to safely move our guests to and through their activities on board Eclipse. And I wanted to stress that because that's so important, because you have to keep in mind, we pioneered this. No other operator yet has operated helicopters, submarines, and all the other typical excursions in Antarctica yet. I know some are coming online in the next season or two, but it truly was like watching a beautiful ballet when all the Discovery options are running simultaneously. It could not have been done if it was not for our Discovery guides and the crew itself. So adding all this, and then next year we're adding paddleboarding. And then we're going to be adding also the following year polar snorkeling and heliskiing, because we want to keep pioneering. We want to keep on the cutting edge from everybody else. So just understand the logistics that go behind this, and that the crew and the team have it so dialed in that, just to give you a quick example, that the moment the ship gets on DPS on station, it will take the average operator anywhere from 20 minutes to 50 minutes before guests start getting off the ship, okay? We have it so dialed in now that it takes onboard the Eclipse 23 minutes. To the time we get all the Zodiacs in the water, the Discovery team on shore flagging the shore, the helicopter bay, the helicopters out, guests going to the helicopters, the submarine out at the dive site, the kayakers heading into the water, and guests getting into Zodiacs to go to shore or go on a Zodiac cruise or being shuttled to the sub or a shuttle to kayaks, 23 minutes. So amazing. Yep. Ricardo, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me ask you two things.
Yes.
What about how long does it take a kayak tour? And what about the special clothes for all this kind of experience? Could you tell us?
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful question. So your typical kayak excursion lasts anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And the reason why I say that is it all depends on how well the guests are doing, holding up to the weather. So we provide dry suits for the kayakers. The paddle boarders will have dry suits as well. And that's just to keep you dry. Inside the dry suit, you would wear your warm clothes. So you would wear your thermal layers, your mid layer, your warm layer. Now keep in mind, because you're paddling and moving, you do generate a lot of heat. So you don't want to overdress. And our kayak guides in their presentation will go through all that with you on layering and everything. We also have booties for you, neoprene booties, and we have waterproof gloves for you as well, because your hands paddling is really the only thing outside exposed that can get wet. So we do have waterproof gloves, but you will wear your warm layer gloves underneath there. And so typically with that excursion, I'd say the average kayak has been going out for about an hour and a half. So pretty much that whole time out there, because they're just having an amazing time with the whales nearby, or penguins, or paddling past ice floes that have seals on it and everything. So yeah, they usually go anywhere from an hour and a half or so by the time they're ready to head back itself. Also and just to lead into that question with the submarine itself, we actually have our guests dress down on the submarine. And the reason why is the submarine itself is climate controlled, as is the helicopter. So we don't want you to overheat. We do want you to wear a dark layer in the sub, because on the bubble, it'll reflect back, so you won't see outside too well. So we want you to wear that dark parka that we provide for you, the Scenic jacket, but you will dress lightly for that. You'll have a quick Zodiac shuttle to and from the sub, but it doesn't take that long. And then once you get in the sub, you'll get warmed up. In the helicopter itself, you will have a dry suit, which is a requirement. The submarine, you do not have a dry suit because you don't need it. So in the helicopter, you'll wear a light layer, a dry suit, because once again, the helicopter is climate controlled, so you don't want to overheat. And you'll wear your street shoes, your sneakers that you wear on the ship itself onto the helicopter. So I hope that answers that question for you. Okay. So moving on, next is one thing I wanted to show with this slide, and I'm very proud of this right now because, like I said, we're pioneering this, and I know other operators will be coming online in the next year or two. But nowhere else on a single voyage can you discover Antarctica or the Arctic or wherever Eclipse might take you, but by air in one of two Scenic Eclipse's helicopters, on the water by kayaking, paddleboarding, Zodiac cruising, or on the Zodiacs itself, under the water by the Scenic Neptune submarine, and then soon we'll be introducing the polar snorkeling for guests, or on land, itself. And, what's amazing is on land or sea or on the water, under the water, it's all guided by our discovery team itself and by our guides. And like I said earlier, they're all specialists in their own fields to give you that enriched experience, so that most importantly, when the guests come on one of these trips, they are coming for a purpose and a story. And our guides, it's not about our guides' story, it's about our guest story. And this is how we can help our guests tell their own story. Yeah, Ricardo, go ahead.
How big is the exploration team on board the Scenic Eclipse?
Yep, so in the polar regions, we have our full discovery team, which is 20 people. One is your discovery leader, and then we have 2 assistant discovery leaders, and then the other 17 are the discovery team themselves. And like I said, the discovery team makes up of lecturers, specialists, naturalists, everyone drives zodiacs, everyone makes up, you know, different roles. And then we have our pilots who are part of the discovery team. So we have 2 helicopter pilots, and normally we'll have a submarine pilot and a safety boat. So if you include the pilots and our safety boat for the submarine, we're up there around 23 to 25 full complement discovery team in polar regions. In our non-polar regions, we usually will have about 6 discovery team on board who are lecturers specifically. They'll focus on the lectures on board as well as assisting with kayaking and paddleboarding, our water sports specialists as well. And so that's your typical complement where we are. Okay. So with that, I just wanted to introduce, you know, a slide. This is what our guides look like. One of our other guides I forgot to mention is our videographer, which is very special. So our videographer on board is not only making a voyage video after every voyage. So you can imagine 11-day voyage versus our 21-day voyage. But on our 11-day voyage, you are going to go home with a voyage movie, usually about 20 minutes long. So from day one, our videographer is already filming you coming on board the ship, and is every evening is creating that story for you from day one to the last day. So he or she is working literally around the clock, filming, jumping back on the ship, downloading, going back out, getting the money shot, doing this, that, getting everybody filmed, so on. So that's a huge added value to our discovery team, as well as the videographer that's there. So this was on one of our ice landings. This shot was taken, and it's just, you know, a special team from around the world. On this particular voyage, we had 11 countries represented from around the world who is part of your discovery team. So we have multiple languages spoken on the team itself, who can do translations if need be, but most importantly, who are engaging with their guests throughout the voyages themselves. Okay. So real quick, to talk about some of the diverse wildlife that can be encountered on there. You know, so here we have king penguins that we can see. You can see up to 8 species of penguin on a typical Antarctic voyages. And I just want to emphasize, you won't always see all 8 species, but we can definitely see up to 8 different species of penguins there. Okay. We have our chin straps that you'll definitely see. We always have what we call our party of 3, which is our chin straps, Adelie, and Gentoo penguins. We'll guarantee you'll always see those 3. It's the other 5 that are the unique ones that are special and we can see. We have our Adelie here, and then I just wanted to show our one other famous macaronis that everyone, you know, when you see a macaroni, it's always pretty special out there. Okay. And then the next ones that we can see, some of the other wildlife, are our different seals that we can see here. We have our southern elephant seal. And keep in mind what's so interesting between the southern hemisphere and northern hemisphere. So there is a northern hemisphere elephant seal, and then you have your southern. And yes, they may have the snout, even though our northern hemisphere has a much larger snout, but our southern hemisphere can dive much further in deeper waters, and is actually a couple tons bigger as well. So it's special, and that's why it's so special to not only go to the Antarctic region on Eclipse, but make sure you go to the Arctic region as well. Because once again, the pioneering experience that you'll have in the Antarctic, you will have in the Arctic as well up there. So here we have our crab eater seal that you would see. to another one that's also very common is our leopard seal. And it's so perfect getting this money shot of the ship in the background, the leopard seal posing for us right here. And keep in mind, Antarctica only has 2 predators. You have your leopard seal and your orca. Those are your 2 predators. The rest are either opportunists or your typical vulture that pick up the remains from your orca or your leopard seal. But down there, that's what you have for your 2 predators, your apex predators. And then, of course, our whales that you would see here. So, so beautiful, the whales. And the whales, the humpbacks especially, are so curious of humans. Now, keep in mind, one thing I just want to stress about the wildlife in Antarctica, they don't have fear of humans because they don't know what we are. You know, they should not be hunted. I don't want to get into the politics of hunting illegally, but they are, you know, the wildlife's not hunted. So to them, we're just a curiosity. And because of that, they want to see what we are and who we are. So it makes Zodiac cruises, it makes just off of the ship something so special to, you know, your helicopter flight when you see, you know, a pod of whales bubble feeding or, you know, below you or, you know, swimming. And keep in mind from the helicopters, and I just want to stress that you may get a view like this from the helicopter, but you're still over 1,000 feet above. And the reason why is we stay above where the birds will fly, so we don't run into any problems with the birds. But you always want to make sure you have that telephoto lens with you on the helicopter so you can catch views like this. And this, you know, view is just a stunning view of the humpback. And here's a view of actually from a Zodiac watching the humpbacks feeding. To this, I took this shot. This orca is no more than 5 days old. This was from the ship itself, swimming along with mom in the pod of orcas, and I was just able to catch this baby, you know, just porpoising right from the ship, and it was stunning. So not only will you have that adventure, you know, off the ship on excursions, but I'll guarantee you that if we see a pod of whales, whether it's orcas or humpbacks or whomever, the expedition leader or myself, if I'm your discovery leader on board, will get on the intercom and say, you know, we have a pod of orcas outside, get outside right now, your discovery team is out there, and join in the festivities because they're giving us a good show. And that's what this was. We had a pod of roughly about 18 orcas. We had some babies, and they were curious about the ship, and they came right up to the ship. And we just went silent on the ship, no movement, and they just came around us. And it was just amazing to see there. And normally, when we're sailing, if it's a sea day or if we're in between excursions, we would have the discovery team on the bridge because the Eclipse is an open bridge. So our guests are always welcome to be on the bridge anytime, or they're on the outer decks. And so our discovery team is looking for the wildlife. They're looking for the whales. They're out there. They're on the bridge. So please join them on the outer deck or on the bridge. If you have any questions about wildlife, where we are, the bridge team, the captain is always up there as well. Always feel free to ask as many questions as you like. But their purpose out there is to look for the wildlife for you. So the Arctic, the differences between what you'll see between the Arctic and Antarctic, obviously the wildlife. And now one thing is, and we get this question often, when we're in Antarctica, when are we going to see the polar bears? Or when we're in the Arctic, when are we going to see the penguins? So I do have a slide when I do presentations. I didn't put it on here, but there is a slide of a penguin and a polar bear next to each other, and then a big circle with a hash across it going, it ain't going to happen. So when we get this question, I always tell my guides that always remember there's a 10-second rule. The 10-second rule is don't answer the question because you're going to regret it. Wait 10 seconds, catch your breath, formulate your answer, and then answer properly. Okay, especially when you get a question like, why haven't we seen polar bears yet? And then once I had the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi on one of my cruises in the Zodiac with his harem and his secretaries, and he asked the question. So I gave myself my 10-second rule, and I said, well, let me explain the difference between the wildlife of the Arctic and Antarctic and the reason why. And so, because I wasn't about to give the snarky answer that we typically would want to give. But there, that is a typical question. And so as, yourself, you want to make sure as agents, you want to make sure, ask your guests when they're booking for cruises, what do you want out of the cruise? What wildlife do you want to see? Do you want to see, in the birds? What kind of birds? Because there are different species of birds from the Arctic and Antarctic. Or what kind of mammals would you want to see? Or, that's there because if you want to see penguins, well, do you want to see baby penguins? Well, you want to go in December. Do you want to see, because in December, that's when the parents are on the eggs, and they'll start hatching around just after Christmas time into early January. Then you'll see the babies at that point. You want to see whales? Well, you'll see whales early in November, early season through March, but you want to see the prime whale season, that's usually January, February is prime whale season when they're all down there feeding. So, or do you want to see the birds? And so make sure as agents, you really ask your guests, your clients, what do you want to see so you can send them at the right time to go see what they want to see. So that's very important. So in the Arctic itself, like I said, with the birds, I just have this puffin there because that's a very common seabird that for the Arctic, everyone wants to see themselves there. So there's that. But you're going to see more scenery in the Arctic itself, where in the Antarctic, yes, Antarctic is the most mountainous continent in the world. You're going to see a lot of ice, a lot of glaciers. You're going to see a lot of bare rock. You will start seeing greenery now in Antarctica, and that's lichens, mosses, and grasses, but that's due to climate change, and what's happening is they can sustain year-round now. But in Iceland, for instance, you will do more tours. So we're going to visit more villages. The landscape is much more diverse in the Arctic itself. So here, when we're kayaking in the Arctic, you're going to see more tundra, the Arctic tundra. Of course, we'll see ice and everything, but you're not going to see the kind of glaciers or the kind of snow cap that you will see in Antarctica versus the Arctic itself. So the landscape is very different that you'll see. This is in Svalbard, and you'll see this isn't stars, it's the birds that are flying above. And what's amazing is there's one species of birds that has the longest migration route back and forth, and they actually migrate from this Antarctica to the Arctic and back, is the Arctic tern. And it has that largest migration route between the pole, not the poles, but the Arctic regions themselves, so the polar regions. And so this is a nesting area that you'll see. So you'll actually see more nesting areas in the Arctic. Yes, we do have nesting down in the Antarctic, but you'll have far more that you'll see. We'll also actually visit Inuit villages in the Arctic and have wonderful interactions in the Arctic itself. So that's something that's very different, is you'll actually visit the people. And normally we'll set up where the locals will set up what's beautiful is tea and cake in their community center or their church for us. So when we arrive, you'll get a tour of the village, and then they'll have their local flavors for you to enjoy and speak with and everything. So we'll have that wonderful interaction. And you'll also visit from small Inuit villages to your medium-sized villages. And one thing you'll notice in the Arctic are the different colors of the buildings. And why is that? Well, each color actually represents something different. So, you know, and so in the wintertime, when everything is just white itself, in order to recognize where's the store, where's the hospital, where's the community center, where's a home, they're all color represented so that it makes it so much easier. And remember, at night, or in the Arctic, during the Arctic winter, when you have no daylight, from your flashlight or your snowmobile, in order to see the building that you want to go to, that's another reason why it's color coded as well. On up to your larger Arctic cities that you'll see, even though what we may consider a city, you know, typical city in Brazil where there's millions and millions, here we're just talking tens of thousands of people or a couple thousand people. But we will go visit the cities. In this typical fishing village here, where we'll get you off and you'll spend the day in town to the museums, and we'll have tours set up by the locals, and you'll get an opportunity to do local tastings as well, which is pretty special. On up to the wildlife. So you have a whole new diverse species of wildlife, from the birds, the seals, the whales and bears. And as I mentioned, the one bird species that actually has that longest migration route. And remember, as I said, you won't see penguins up north, as you won't see polar bears down south, but you have this whole other species of wildlife that's such a treat to see. And yes, you will kayak, paddleboard. We do all the same other excursions in Antarctica as you will in the Arctic. And so what makes it so special, like I said, is you'll be able to experience from the air, on the water, under the water, and on land, whatever polar region you're in. And regardless, it's a story that your guests will be able to tell and build and create their story. The crew, the discovery team is just there to help enrich their story and be a part of it, but making sure they leave with the story. So that's it. So thank you so much. I hope that gives you a well-rounded experience between the two polar regions and what life is like on board for our guests on board Scenic Eclipse.
Jason, thank you very much for your time to be here with us, and I hope meet you as soon as possible on board.
Oh, you will.
It was incredible. Thank you very much.
All right, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Muito bem, pessoal. Nós tivemos aí quase que uma aula, né? Hein, Flavinho? Que tal? Você gostou?
Eu estou impressionado. Eu, sinceramente, estou sem palavras. Eu quero embarcar na próxima viagem.
Queremos, sem sombra de dúvidas. Vamos tentar colocar muitos brasileiros a bordo, né? Muito obrigado de novo, Flávio, por ter trazido o Jason para falar com a gente ter proporcionado isso para a nossa audiência, os nossos queridos consultores e agentes de viagem, e espero que todos tenham gostado. Muito obrigado e até a próxima.
Obrigado a todos. Um abraço, pessoal.
Velle Representações, experiências e conexões ao redor do mundo.